Hi, Michael Harvey, storyteller here, with some comments on the first 10 minutes of a talk, a TED talk given by Macartney. Macartney runs a college called Embercombe in Devon in southwest England, and in the college they have the most amazing series of exciting, stimulating, creative and transformational courses, and I advise you to check it out. And I also encourage you to watch the rest of Mac's talk when you get the chance. There's a lot in this talk, but I wanted to limit my comments to a few things. One is his pauses, which you can't really miss. He uses pauses a lot because of the importance of what he's talking about. And he uses some rhetorical techniques in order to structure his talk, which I don't see used very often, and I think they are very useful and well executed by Mac. And also embodiment. His delivery, as you will see, is quite straight, but there's a critical point in the talk where he becomes very embodied. Let's have a look.
I think we are a people walking home. We have the threads of a broken story which we're trying to weave back together again.
That's an interesting way to start. It's a metaphor. He thinks we are a people walking home, trying to weave together the threads of a broken story. There's no indication what that means, but it's a great image. It's quite poetic, and we want to know what it means, and we will shortly. So he's not telling us what he's going to talk about directly. He's using metaphor.
I think this has happened in my own country. I think it's in Britain. I think it's happening all around the world. I guess it's happening here. In 1984,
In 1984, that's a classic connective. It's a connective of time in 1984. So we know we're going to go into a story. We know we're about to get some verbs. Action.
Was mentored at the beginning of a period of years, mentored by a group of Native Americans. And they were the very first ones who stood in front of me and said, "Name your tribes." I didn't know what they were speaking about. I have no tribes.
Very liminal embodiment of a little bit of dialogue. I have no tribes, which he said in his own persona back then in 1984. And then he did this tiny little brush off of his own talking in the persona with the point of view of the indigenous elders who were teaching him. Really, really subtle.
Name your tribes. And I couldn't. And it was this group of Native Americans who stood in front of me and said, Coritani, Ordovici, Silures, Atrebates, Trinovantes, Cornovii, Ordovici went on, named my British tribes. He said, your story was broken. We've talked with you and shared stuff with you, listened to you. We realize you don't even know your own history. You do not know the shoulders of the people upon whom you stand. I think we are a people walking home, trying to weave together the threads of a broken story.
So now he concludes this section by using the metaphor that the image that he used at the beginning. And now it's no longer a metaphor. Now we understand much more clearly what it is he's talking about. He's mapped out the general area of his talk, but in this very interesting, indirect way using metaphor. Let's see what he says next.
I'm not sure that we even remember what our purpose is. Oh, this is so strange to so many older cultures, to indigenous people, many people that I have had the privilege of meeting and learning from.
So we're obviously in a new topic now, and it's gone from losing our way, let's find our way, to what's our purpose.
I wonder what we would say if if somebody came to us and said, what is the purpose of a human life? And we would have, some of us, we would have answers, but would we agree with each other? Is it anything that we really think about? Because if we thought about it, would that not be some of the principles upon which...
Okay, he's using now some rhetorical techniques, some ancient rhetorical techniques that the rhetoricians of ancient Greece and Rome used. This question right now is a rhetorical question, so he's not really asking the question. He's posing the question in order for him to be able to answer it himself. And the problems that he poses later on are to do with how we act, not how we think.
We parent, educate our children, create businesses and the rest. Were we to go to the Kogi Indians of Colombia up in the high Sierra Mountains and we were to ask this question, what is the purpose of a human life? First of all, they'd be extremely confused and baffled, because their children learn this when they're about 3 years old, and so they'd be a little concerned and worried about.
Really nice liminal embodiment of an indigenous elder being a bit confused and baffled. Absolutely tiny, but he took on the point of view of the person who had been teaching him just for less than a second, and then got back to his own point of view.
About us and our condition, and perhaps wondering whether we in some way damaged or missed out on something pretty fundamental. But in the end, anyway, with perhaps benevolence and some kindness, they would lean forward and whisper what the Kogi understand to be the purpose of a human life: to care for all living things. What else? To care for all living things.
Lovely big pause after that. So this is the nub of what he's talking about. To care for all living things should be the premise on which we base our thoughts and actions. And he does it, first of all, from the point of view of the Kogi Indians who he's working with, and then big fat pause, and then he repeats it. So this pause and repetition is absolutely key to what Mac is doing in this talk.
When a people don't know their purpose, when they have no sense of the storyline that they are moving, they're walking on, then how lost can you be?
Another rhetorical question.
Have we designed businesses based upon that principle?
More rhetorical questions.
To care for all living things. And by the way, of course, for the Kogi, everything is living. Everything is living. And that means we care for everything and everybody. Have we designed our schools?
Another rhetorical question.
Both our school for our very little children as they grow older, the secondary schools. Have we designed our universities to care for all living things?
And he's using this ladder of education from primary to university level in order to repeat this purpose of caring for all living things.
I would suggest, you see, I feel that it is at this profound level that we need to begin. And why is this so important now? You see, all through history, people have been killing each other, countries have been invading, terrible things have happened, beautiful things have happened, civilizations have risen and collapsed and risen again. So somebody said to me in a talk not so long ago.
Okay, somebody said to me in a talk not so long ago, this is another ancient rhetorical technique, and it's the Socratic dialogue. So in a minute, he's got, it looks like I've got to move my head because that looks very strange with me superimposed on Mac's shoulders. Anyway, so yes, this is the Socratic dialogue where you kind of invent a character with whom you're going to have a discussion. The person who invented this was Plato, who wrote Socratic dialogues in which Socrates, the great philosopher, starred, and then he would talk with people. But the point of Socratic dialogue is that it's not a competition. Socrates regarded himself as a midwife who would help people give birth to a realization of the truth, rather than convince them to share the same point of view that Socrates had, although actually that is always what happened. People always ended up agreeing with Socrates. And he's using the same technique of having someone to talk to, having someone to argue against. So this is the person, the imaginary person that came to him and said, is this even possible?
They said, well, hasn't it always been like this? You seem to be inferring that this time on Earth is in some way special. And I said, yes, I think it is. I think it's a hinge period in the entire story of our species. And he said, why? And I said, because our reach has now extended around the world.
Okay, this embodiment, this kind of image of the world he does with his arms, he's going to do it about 10 times now. And he uses it as a way to literally embody the world. He's talking about the earth as a system and a structure, and he uses this gesture many times in order to reinforce it in a way that words just can't. So this is a particularly strong type of embodiment. Have a watch.
Everything that we do now has the capacity to span the world, to wrap its arms right around the world.
That was like 2.5.
The oceans are not only polluted, if you like, around Britain, they are polluted all around the world. Our rivers, our fresh water, our forests, all around the world. Slavery now is a trade that is conducted all around the world.
Notice he's not pausing anymore.
Everything
call that 7, those 2 half ones.
It's massive. Our
8.
financial system, our economy, everything. When a pin drops one place, as we already know, it will rebound and react all around the world.
That's 9.
And this, of course, applies.
He's not using any of his trademark pauses
wonderful and good things as well. Of course it does. But while we are prodigiously clever, it does not appear to me that we have yet managed to find wisdom.
This is where he's taking us. This is the shift that he's recommending, is that we go from cleverness to wisdom.
So our prodigious cleverness just exerts itself and moves, but the majority of that cleverness is directed towards things that will serve and benefit a few in the short term, nobody in the long term.
And he finished with his world gesture to reinforce what he's talking about. So although it looked like a man talking clearly with loads of pauses and a fair amount of gravitas, there's a lot in there, and there's a lot we can take for it. If you've got any questions about that, do drop me, just comment, and I'll try and respond. And keep watching and keep listening.